Video games are one of the best attributes of entertainment that this world has to offer. This system gave us imagination, contribution, and visualization about fictional characters that accomplished many achievements, such as defeating a giant brain, or saving animals from a mad scientist, or just as simple as rescuing a princess from a tower that is guarded by a big, gigantic turtle. However, we as gamers, or just as fans in general, have not appreciated the beginning of our new era that is given to us by Discovery. Well, today, I am here to expand our knowledge on our gaming franchises to this very day. Let's go back in time when it was 1977. Oh, the events that came out that year in the entertainment business. Like when Marquette won the first D1 basketball championship, or when on January 3rd, the company Apple came out that year. Or how about one of the greatest film franchises of all time came out that year, called Star Wars. Yes, there were great events that came out, but one of the most particular events that not only changed the way we look at games, but started the game genre itself. Well, meet the Atari 2600, made in 1977 around Christmas time. Oh, the Christmas that must have been. When it first came out, people weren't sure of how successful this little Darth Vader colored beast was gonna become. But after watching some of the crazy commercials the Atari had when it first came out, audiences were willing to give it a try, paying over $100 for the system when it first came out. And as you would expect, it was very popular. But wouldn't you rather see me play the game itself rather than just watch me talk about it all day? Well, you're in luck because what I have before you is the Atari 2600. Such a unique specimen. The Atari was originally black and brown with a wooden panel underneath. Here, it's black and red. Let's take a look at this. The Atari had a power on and off switch. That's kind of unusual, is it not? Think of it nowadays where we have just buttons to press it on and off, like the Xbox 360 or the PS4, but here we use electronic switches that allow us to turn the system on. However, right next to it is the color switch. Yeah, this is one of the unique parts about the Atari. It had a color feature. Most of the games were in color anyway. The Atari was actually one of the very first consoles to have actual graphics. Even though the Odyssey came out before that, the Odyssey just had overlays. It didn't really have actual graphics. Sure, there was Pong, but everyone had Pong. But anyway, you had the choice of putting your TV to either color or black and white. Most of the TVs back then were black and white, so that's really all you had. Then right next to it is a game select. If anything, if you want a harder difficulty, there were multiple difficulties on each setting for each different game. All you had to do was just keep pressing this one switch. And then here's the game reset switch. Yeah, it's not like usual consoles where if you get a game over, it automatically goes back to the start. Here, every time when you get a game over, you just hit that and it resets it. Then the Atari had two controllers. Let's take a look. The Atari controllers are actually one of the unique controllers that has ever created in its time. The Atari had an analog stick, which is pretty cool, but it's not as fluent as other controllers. It has this one button too. That's the unique part about it as well. It has only one individual button, making it as simple but as fun as possible. The Atari's controllers were also pretty long when it comes to length of the wires. Look how long this is. It's as long as far as my arms can be apart. That's a pretty long wire, but it's not as long as the AC adapter. Look how long this is. I've never seen an AC adapter this long before, ever. But it's what made the Atari so great, and it's what got audiences involved. Then, here is the RF switch. Now you're probably gonna ask me, where are the RCA cables? Well, back then there weren't any RCA cables. You don't see the red, yellow, and white cables as you would usually do for back then. You actually have an RF cable, which you can get as Radio Shack if you cannot see the title right there. It would have a game switch, and it will also have a TV switch. Actually, setting up the console was pretty complicated back then. Most of the parents even didn't know how to set it up. They would have to call someone from Atari to ask to set it up. Now most kids usually know how to set up a console, especially parents nowadays. Anyway, then there's also the channels. If you look on here, you are able to have your choice of whether it's channel 2 or channel 3. Yep, not channel 3 or channel 4, channel 2 was involved. The Atari 2600 had the longest lifespan of video games that ever came out, but I only have 4 with me. Now that doesn't mean I have 4 in my collection, this is just the 4 that I'm presenting to you guys. One of the games that I have is Miss Pac-Man, an arcade copy, Space Invaders, another arcade copy, Vanguard, which is a very great game, and Defender, which also is a great game. Let's take a look at Miss Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. Miss Pac-Man for the Atari 2600 was a home port version of the arcade port of Pac-Man. The goal of the game is to eat up all the dots on the screen without being eaten yourself. The color on the Atari really does show in this game, definitely an improvement over the original game. All you see from this is 3 colors, yellow, blue, and green. The enemies you battle are ghosts who want Pac-Man for lunch. If they catch you, you lose a life. 3 lives and you're dead, with no continues or no checkpoints for that matter. The game does represent itself very well as a fun game, but there are problems that I find. The controls will take some time to get used to. For an Atari game, it's okay, but modern gamers would have a trouble time adapting to the Atari controls, especially when they're not that fluent. Sometimes I would have trouble trying to navigate Miss Pac-Man, and it usually ends in me losing a life. Another problem is, this game can get quite difficult, but challenge was essential back then. As Miss Pac-Man progresses farther in the game, you will also find that she can eat these bigger dots that allow her invincibility for a brief time. But you'll also notice 2 different things. 1. The background color will change into a different color. And 2. The power-up will last shorter than its original state. This game, for me, is an 8 out of 10, as a game in general. Now let's move on to our next game. Now on to our second game for the Atari 2600, which is an arcade port of the original arcade game. This is Space Invaders for the Atari 2600. When it first came out, everyone was obsessed with this game. Let's give it a try. Alright, so here it is. This is you, all alone against Space Invaders. Yep, that's you right there at the bottom of the screen. That green tank is you, and you're trying to fight the Space Invaders from coming to Earth and taking over your planet. Even if you are incredibly outnumbered, thankfully you have protection. These 3 bunkers, which are these red polygons on the screen, they help protect you from taking hits. If you hide behind them, the Space Invaders can shoot them and nothing happens. However, if they hit you, then you lose a life. 3 hits and you're dead. However, unlike the last 3 games, this one has a secondary feature. If even one of the aliens lands on Earth, then your game is automatically over. This is one of the most classic Atari 2600 games ever to be released for the Atari. Probably ever to be released as a game in general. And why is that? For one reason. Because it's so addicting. Think of it this way. All these aliens are on the screen and you have to destroy them all. However, while that's going on, they're firing back, and you're moving around constantly trying to fight back. If even one of the aliens comes near a bunker, the bunker will disappear, causing you to be vulnerable. This game is hard, and it takes no prisoners. There is a second player function on the Atari, but that's kinda irrelevant, being that it's more competitive than you are helping each other out. That's why a one-player mode is much better and much more addicting. This game's music is by far the most classic. You might be thinking, well, Dante, this game doesn't have music, it's an Atari game. Well, just listen to the beat. In my opinion, that's music. And because it gets faster and faster and faster, then all of a sudden, bam. In conclusion, I have nothing else to say about Space Invaders. All that I really can say is that it's a great game, and anyone who has an Atari 2600, or anyone has a console in general, Space Invaders is the way to go. If you're feeling bored, if you don't know what to do, play Space Invaders. Or, play this next game. Now how about a space shooter this time? This is Defender for the Atari 2600, one of the very first space games out there for the Atari 2600. Let's give this a shot and see how this game is. This is one of the early space games for the Atari 2600. One thing I should mention is that the Atari loved space games. This genre is one of the main aspects that got Atari so popular. What I like about this game that stands out from all the other Atari games is that it gives you a map telling you how many ships or how many enemies are on the level. If you press the button, you can fire magic bullets that look like bits of pieces off of a rainbow. But again, like Miss Pac-Man, the problem is in the control. It's like if you turn around, the screen turns with you and it drags some of the enemies closer, which even sometimes can lead to losing a life. Other than that, I have no problems with this game, so let's move on. Finally, last but never least, we get Vanguard for the Atari 2600. This is personally my favorite game aside from Joust. I wonder why. Let's give it a shot. Ah, yes. The one game with the famous theme song. Man, that's still a great song. This game is probably the most colorful game of my collection that I have. And keep in mind, I do have more than just 4 Atari games. And also keep in mind that this is one of the very few Atari games that actually can be beat. The first level is a 2D space shooter with enemies that can just go straight, but if you're in their line of fire, they charge right at you. I like how you can shoot in all 4 directions if you want. Vanguard is the main villain in this game, and you got to destroy him. The second level is more of a 3D perspective, with enemies just going in a pattern. The objective of this level is to destroy all the ships that are in your way. Level 3 is the same thing as level 1, but it's different enemies and harder level design. Finally, level 4, which is a 3D perspective, and the hardest level, which is rightfully so. And finally, Vanguard. Yep, this is Vanguard, and you gotta destroy him. After you destroy him, you get some explosions with flashy colors. This game is by far the best in the Atari 2600 collection in my opinion, and it's a good thing I have it in mind. If you ever see this game, I would give it a try. Well, that's it. At least for right now. If I go through all these Atari games in one review, it would just spoil the fun. In conclusion, I can safely say that the Atari 2600 is probably still the most classic console that ever was released back then, even to this very day. So, visit me next time where we'll take a trip to 1983 and 4, and we'll be visiting 8-bits. I'm Donnie Bryant, and I'll see you next time on Historics.